Good morning. This is Chris Stadler, and I'm reporting. No, I'm reacting. This is called, I think I'm going to call this Journalist Reacts. And what we're going to do is look at a few news sources in the Magic Valley because this is where I live, and this is Twin Falls. And let me get this out of my shot. First time. We're going to talk about journalism and the state of journalism and why it's important and how we should be thinking about journalism in Twin Falls. I I graduated from a journalism school. I work in branding, but I graduated from a journalism school and I taught in the journalism school for 4 years at the University of Oregon. And it as I think about as I always thought about branding, I always think about truth, right? We have to be true. When companies, here's where it matters. When companies do what their values really are, if they really fulfill their values, they um they find it easier to do business because everybody's like, "Oh, what they do is what they say they do." And by the way, it's much easier to run a company that lives out its values because it's what it naturally does. And then you can build and refine those values. So why am I qualified for this? I don't know. Um, I love to find truth in things, and when we do workshops with clients, and they say when we talk about values and we're asking what their values are, and they're like, oh well, we're this one thing, and oh we're the opposite too because it's politically correct to say you're these two opposite things. That's where I get really interested, and I say, okay, well, what do you mean by that, and what do you do that expresses that? Because what I want to know, maybe their definition is off. Maybe they're using a buzzword when they really mean something else. And so, uh, truth is really important. And when we talk about truth, we talk about sometimes in the liberal arts, you talk about basically ontology, which is grammar, grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And so this channel is, I'm hoping this is about grammar. It's about logic. It's about rhetoric. It's about the trivium, the basics of the liberal arts, because that's how we know truth. And why does truth matter? Because if we're lying, we're not helping people. If we don't have an accurate assessment of the situation, we can't really help people. And helping people is about truth, and it's a testable truth, and it's a shared truth, and it's something that we all need to be able to agree on and understand. If local reporting doesn't have the same values that I do, they're going to ask different questions. I don't know if you notice, but when you choose your media sources, oftentimes based on what are the questions they ask, what's their point of view, because they're going to dig out the things that I think are important. We're like, oh, then we just follow the news that tells us what we want to hear. Well, kind of, because part of it is like, yeah, if we're just partisans, we're just like, yeah, whatever news source tells me what I want to hear, I'm gonna choose. But a lot of people, I hope myself included, we're looking at news sources and saying they're asking the questions that I ask because they have my values. And so they're going to be picking at things that the other side wants to hide because the other side has their values and their goals. And so let's look at some news. All right, so I'm looking at, and this is the first time I've looked at this article. Actually, I skimmed it before we jumped on. I don't want to mislead you guys, but okay, so this is a news source, and what I want to do is just look and say, okay, um, what is this news source, and let's evaluate it for politics. Because when I was looking at it, I was like, all right, two candidates are on the ballot for state senator in District 24 as Zuiderveld is challenged by Easterling. Don't ask me how I know how to pronounce Zuiderveld. I watch too much Dutch soccer. So Easterling, I'm assuming that I'm pronouncing that correctly. So here's a little interview that I didn't watch. We could watch together if you want. Um, and then, so let's look and see who Idaho News 6. So I'm assuming most news organizations fall on the liberal side because at the journalism school, I didn't know any conservatives. Um, and so I'm just assuming that most people are going to be liberal. And when they come to a town like Twin Falls, they're probably going to bring those values with them, and then really try to help these backward people in Twin Falls to understand how the world should be, right? And the reason I say that is because that's the attitude I saw at the University of Oregon. There was not a lot of respect in the education school, in the J school. There just wasn't a lot of respect, and those two things are two schools that push people back into local small areas. Your public school is going to be a huge leverage point for like larger government ideas, whether you like that or not. Um, and it's going to be they're going to be people who are educated in schools like that, and so it's important to know. All right, so Twin Falls, let's see, Twin Falls County, Idaho. Oh yeah, Twin Falls County, Idaho. Not Twin Falls. Not very specific there. Republican State Senator Glenita Zuiderveld uh, represents rural Twin Falls, Gooding, and Camas counties. This year, she has a challenge from Democrat Edward Easterling in the November 5th general election. Zuiderveld has served in the state Senate since 2022. Okay, so she's not super long in the tooth there. She defeated a primary challenge this spring and faces her first general election contest. So a primary challenge. So she, in a primary, she went up against, in a Republican primary, she won against somebody. Which is she the more conservative, the more liberal? Not sure. Easterling did not respond to several calls and emails for this story. So he's the Democrat. He didn't respond. Oftentimes that's because he does not trust this news source. Initially, I'm getting conservative vibes from this news source. I did not expect that. But let's see. Both Easterling and Zuiderveld attended a candidate forum in April. Okay, so you can check that out if you want to see that and hear the things they talk about. And again, we can review that if you guys want me to. District 24 covers rural Twin Falls, Gooding, and Camas counties. Great voter guide. That would be interesting too. They're featuring a voter guide. Usually voter guides are oh man, it's going to open the same window. Usually voter guides are biased because they're trying to give you. It has to come from a point of view, right? There's no such thing as a voter guide that doesn't come from a point of view of somebody. You might include 2 points of view in the voter guide, but it definitely has a bias, especially if it doesn't contain all the points of view. Let's see. This doesn't help me. This isn't a direct link to the voter guide. So it's just Idaho News 6. Okay, so it's not like one voter guide. Proposition 1. Let's look at that later, guys. That looks like a good one. All right. I asked Senator Glenita Zuiderveld if she was more relaxed. Okay, yeah, who cares if she's relaxed? Don't really care. 100%, Zuiderveld said. The hard race is the primary when the Republicans are trying to pick their quarterback to go onto the general. And so that's really where you do a lot of work. Okay, so she's confident that a Republican is going to win and not a Democrat. It sounds like to me. District 24 incumbent Glenita Zuiderveld is confident approaching the general election, even though Democrat Edward Easterling will also appear on the ballot. That almost kind of sounds dismissive. Like, yeah, he'll be there too. It's just the way this is written. She's already looking ahead to what lawmakers can accomplish next session. Good, whatever. On the Senate now, we're probably up to 15 strong conservatives that are for less government, less spending, and just fighting against a lot of the woke agenda in our work, Zuiderveld said. Okay, let's talk about this for a second. This tells me that she's probably a more conservative Republican because she is talking about less government. She's not saying the government is your savior. The government is, at least that's what's implied, less spending. So in other words, less spending meaning, well, less government, less spending, kind of the same, right? And then just fighting against a lot of the woke agenda in our work, Zuiderveld said. Woke agenda. So that's really, that sounds to me like almost like shots fired, right? But maybe it's just, she's using that word to just because most people know what that is. And so maybe she's using that. It seems like a trigger word. It seems like a word that is like unnecessarily combative. But at the same time, I'm trying to think of another word that would be better than that. you could say progressive, but I think a lot of people wouldn't know what that means or what's implied by that. And so, but it is interesting, woke agenda in our work. So she's combating the woke agenda. So that tells me she's a little more on the, probably on the, for sure, the conservative side. Um, the woke agenda implies a lot of, in my experience, it implies a particular worldview that is not traditional. And sometime I'd love to talk about the difference between conservative and uh, the kinds of conservative ideas there are, the kinds of progressive ideas there are. Because conservative and progressive, I'd love to look at those words in isolation from their political context and kind of break those down a little bit. Her top two priorities for future legislation are appealing the grocery tax and bringing lessons on the Ten Commandments back into public schools. Holy cow, bringing lessons on the Ten Commandments back into public schools. I am very curious how, first of all, how you would do that, because I don't know. In my experience with Kimberly School Board, it sounds like the federal government tells us what we're doing with the tax money that we send there, right? So we send tax money to Washington and they send it back to us and tell us what we're allowed to do with it, which is kind of funny. To me, it seems a little funny, but maybe they know better than we do. All right, so the Ten Commandments back into Idaho schools. I'm very curious too about like what are what are we doing here? I think that's a bigger conversation too, because the Ten Commandments back into public schools. Now we get into epistemology now. How do we know what we know? Because the Ten Commandments being brought into public schools, and my audio is too high. The Ten Commandments being brought into public schools, that implies that we get our knowledge, that we understand truth, that truth exists in, at least the Ten Commandments approximate objective truth about right and wrong. The benefit of that is that we would have a shared view of right and wrong. The disadvantage of that, if it's not true, is that we are now committing to a code that isn't true and doesn't correspond to reality, and therefore will not be helpful to people. And the other thing that people might have a problem with is that if we say, okay, well, we're a society that what's more important than truth is our freedom to believe what we want to believe. The issue with that is that we have to make sure that we're not saying that whatever we want to believe is true because we live in a free country. That's not that I wouldn't say that's true. And I think I would be on the side, for sure, on the side of no, we need to have a truth, because I really believe that if you're not acquainted with truth, you cannot help people. And as much as you say that, oh, we're about doing good and we're about, whatever, sympathizing, empathizing, whatever, you can say that until you're blue in the face. But if your policies aren't grounded in reality, and if they aren't grounded in really helping people, like understanding how people grow, you're not living in reality, and you're going to have a real problem. We're going to have a problem governing ourselves because we don't share the same reality. So, one example I have is that I remember being at the University of Oregon, and you would have professors who they were easy on other people and hard on their own kids. Not hard, but they held their kids to account, but they didn't hold anyone else to account. And they felt like everyone else, they were sympathetic with everyone else and hard on their own kids. And what's interesting about that is their kids grew up strong, maybe on the liberal side, right? If you don't like that, but they grew up strong and able and smart and accountable and capable in a lot of ways. But then and with their students, they would hold them accountable. It's almost like the people they knew and loved, they held accountable, and the people they didn't love and were just theoretical, they were more content saying, well, I really care about them, so I don't want them to have to suffer any pain. Well, that's great, but when your kids, you're depending on your kids to have good grandkids, and it's a different story. And so let's all right, let's get back to the story here. I think that's a good segue. I think it shares a little bit of like why I'm interested in this, because I really do want to make sure that journalism in Idaho and in especially in Magic Valley and the Twin Falls area is accountable and intelligent and and realistic. So, all right. Her opponent, by the way, I'm not here to say Democrat, Republican. I just want to find out the truth, right? All right, so her opponent didn't respond to my request for an interview for this story, despite several voicemails, emails, and efforts to contact him through the Twin Falls County Democrats. So, first of all, one question: why doesn't this guy want to talk? Is it News Idaho 6 is so conservative that he doesn't feel like he'll get a fair shake? That's possible. Um, and then also, why does this journalist feel so? It's almost like he's like, well, I tried to talk to him and I did this and that and this other thing. It's almost like he's being like petty and angry. And then I thought, well, I wonder. First of all, I think it's I don't know if this journalist is I don't agree with how he did this. But at the same time, he's probably like, hey, look, I tried, guys. You know, like he's not being represented here because we don't want to hear from him. He's not being represented here because he didn't want to be represented here. Clearly, right? And so he's doing his journalistic duty. All right. According to his website, however, Easterling has lived in Twin Falls County since 1965 and retired in 2005 after a career with the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. So 1965. So that kind of is like, okay, good. He's not like a, you know, he's not like a new guy from California who's going to wreck our, whatever. So that in a way that's kind of fair, right? It um, kind of helps this guy's credibility. So I like that. I like that fairness there. After a career with Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And so on his website, Easterling says he supports public education, women's rights, and Medicare expansion. So that's consistent, right? Because the Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, I don't know what that is. Probably look it up, but it sounds like a government job, right? On his website, he supports public education. So, um, and I think, wow, this really gets into some interesting territory because I think there are a lot of people who would support public education, maybe not in its current form. And we have such shorthand here in the press, in the media, such shorthand that's just like, oh, you're against public education, and or you're against homeschooling, you know. And it's like, well, yeah, we need that shorthand because we need to be able to talk about it. We need to have a way to talk about it. But at the same time, it hides a lot of it. There are a lot of assumptions in that. Um, Public education could mean like, all right, well, we see here's what we don't like about public education: the indoctrination, the fact that we have to take orders from Washington, as we saw the Kimberly school boards saw firsthand, and I was there, and there were lawyers saying you need to do this or you will be in trouble. And my challenge to the school board was you do what's right, you don't do what you get in trouble for. You're elected officials. You do right, you don't do what's safe, right? Um, which is, my point of view. Any local politicians or any politicians at all in the United States. But we saw that firsthand. So we know that the federal government has a lot to say about our what we teach, our policies, specifically the transgender policy in that case, and then um, uh, the fact that this teachers come from liberal places. We may not share those values. You have in public school system in uh, in the public school system, you have the administration you have to deal with. If you don't like their policies, or if they're pushing down policies and hiring based on certain values, you may not want to send. You may be against public school. if the teachers, what they teach, their policies, policies are at the administrative level, maybe more, but how they teach the topic in the classroom is there's a lot of discretion they have. What about the other kids who are out on the playground with cell phones and watching YouTube videos, and you don't really know what their parents are, you don't really know what kind of blocks they have on their phone or whether they just can watch anything they want. And to be popular, they want to show you the craziest, weirdest stuff that you can see. All those reasons are good reasons. Those are valid reasons, right? To not like public schools. Also, the fact that we're paying for them, we're paying for all that. So those are reasons not to like public schools. The reasons for not liking school choice are less clear to me. I did a little research on this during undergrad, and they're less clear to me. But people say, "Hey, we want our goals," and you have to understand the goals to make sense of any of this. Our goals are to create a society where everybody gets the same education, they're socialized, and they know how to function in society. They know how to follow the rules. They know how they all get the same social studies curriculum and point of view that we taught those teachers at the university before they came to teach your kids at your public school. Um, you might know, you might be able to kind of sense my thoughts on this because I think that the I think that our values should go into our kids, the not the university system's values that teach the teachers, that educate the administrators. And I don't want those values taught to my kids. I want good values, right? Good values. Now, in order to know good values, you have to have an epistemology. You have to be able to say, you know, you have to have grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and you have grammar and logic at least, right? Where you say, okay, what is the self-evident truth? Okay, now that we have a self-evident truth, we can do logic, right? Now that we have a self-evident truth and information, we can do logic. I think for some people, it's maybe the Book of Mormon. Some people, it's the Bible. Some people, it's the Quran, I guess, right? So all these things inform. My problem with journalism is that a lot of times journalists, they bring in their own prejudices. Um, I read an interesting thing. I was reading G.K. Chesterton, and he said that you either have dogma or you have prejudice. And so, and you can see that in journalism. Think about that for a second. Um, you can see that in journalism. You either have journalists who are like, all right, well, we believe the Bible and the Ten Commandments, and therefore we're going to report based on that because we want people to. There has to be an organizing principle for all this information. Or you have journalists who are out there who don't have a set of values. They're going along with what society's values based on feeling, and it's a prejudice. It's a direction, right? Versus a dogma, which is a encoded, accountable system that can be disproved, right? Disprovable, which is good, right? You want disprovable. You want to be able to say, yeah, things are right and wrong. Things that come from it are right and wrong, or whatever, right? So, and so you either have a dogma, a belief system that is tied to an objective reality, or you have a prejudice, which is I don't know right from wrong, but my feelings tell me that these people are being oppressed and this isn't fair. And so I'm going to go with that. And sometimes a dogma will line up with a prejudice, and sometimes they won't. And oftentimes they won't because emotion carries you away, and it is not, is very, very often not helpful in finding the truth because it doesn't subject itself to truth. Whereas a dogma can be tested, and it can be found to be true or not, and it organizes, and everyone can look at it and say and see what it is. Whereas a prejudice is kind of like, well, I'm going this direction, you won't know why, which is problematic for a news story, right? Because if I don't know what their values are, I don't know. I I'm not going to hire someone whose values I don't know if I'm at a news organization because I don't know. I don't. There's no rhyme or reason except for what's in their hearts, and I can't see that, and I can't know that or test it as an editor, as a hiring person at a news organization. Um, Okay, public education, women's rights. I'm assuming this means abortion, because usually that's kind of I don't. I'm having trouble thinking of another big women's rights issue other than abortion, and then Medicare expansion. So this is entitlements, public entitlements, and so um, which is yeah, it's consistent. It's consistent with a value system on the left among the Democrats, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's right. Okay, we haven't talked about that yet. So I always remind them, "I'm your servant, not your savior," Zuiderveld said. Okay, so that would be kind of a classic conservative, like, "Hey, we want you to be strong. If you're not strong, we can't be strong for you," right? Um, Small government, not looking for power, or at least on the surface, right? Not looking for power, you would think, looking for a way to serve. That that's popular terminology for someone who wants to also someone if a politician says something you're not always like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's true, wow, great, finally someone who wants to empower me and not make me dependent on the government, great. But you would see that in what she does and what she doesn't do, and the way she talks, and the way, and if she's consistent in what she says. Consistency is huge, guys. um I could go into that. I could go into that, but I won't. Okay, I will a little bit. I work for a branding agency. I'm looking for truth. When I go out and do a competitive analysis for brands, I'm looking at their let's say 5 to 7 closest competitors. And what I want to see is not just there are a lot of things they can claim. But when I look at their website and their social, I'm looking for, do I believe it? Are they showing me proof, or are they just telling me? And there's a phrase in journalism, it's show don't tell, right? It's kind of a rule. And I use journalism for everything I do at work, right? And so show don't tell. So I'm looking for, are they consistent? Are they believable? Are they showing? Or are they just telling? Because if they're showing and not telling, they're not believable. If Glenita Zuiderveld consistently talks in the same way, if she consistently votes in the same way, if she attends public meetings and is consistent and subjects herself to the people and their questions, then she is a not an atypical politician. She's not typical. So we'll see. These ads, man. Okay, you don't always want government to fix your problems. I want to be able to listen and help where I can. There's times where it's not a government fix, it's a church fix or something else that I can point them to. So she's pointing back to uh, local power, putting the power into the church, putting the power into the local community. And I think for me, I want, I want, oh, I'm not even sharing my screen. That's great. I want people in Twin Falls to be able to take care of themselves, because we know how to take care of each other better than someone from the outside. And if we can do that, then it matters less and less who the president is and who the governor is. It matters a lot more who the sheriff is and who our local people are. And it matters a lot more who lives here, because we're taking care of each other, because we're as good journalists, we're asking questions about needs, and we're not just doing business news that's just like, oh, so and so opened this today and they had their ribbon cutting and the mayor showed up. It's not that. It's, hey, there's a need for this. We're seeing a real need for this. Fuel prices are going up. We have local resources that are now becoming more practical, to make things locally, because the fuel prices are going up and energy is going up. All of a sudden now you're signaling to the economy, here's what we're seeing. Business owners, would be entrepreneurs, here's what we're seeing. Do you have any ideas? Nonprofits, people who want to help, do you have any ideas? Here's a problem in our community. Do you have any ideas? we can solve our own problems. We're smart enough. I know so many people in the Magic Valley area, and they're smart. They're not stupid, and they have solutions, and they're hard workers, and they get things done. And far better to get things done in our local area with people who are our neighbors and who understand our needs. Far better is it for someone to go to a church to get money for something, because the church will get to know them and the church will find ways to help them, or some other nonprofit that can help them that's locally funded. Far better, because then they can say, "Oh, hey, what you need though, you need to get a job. You need to you we're gonna put you on a plan where we're gonna give you less and less each month, and like, talk to us. What's your plan? Okay, we can support that. Stick to that plan though, and ask for help if you need it." And so you're actually making people responsible for their own stuff, which makes them stronger. It makes them less dependent on other people. And if you have people who can do that at the local level, you're thwarting any efforts of the federal government to take over, because now you're making your people stronger. And so that's a great goal. Why would we not want that? We want that for our kids. We want that for the people we teach, for our coworkers, but we don't want that for other people. We want the power. Why do we want the power so much? Why do we want to be the ones in charge so much? So you can see, I'm not, I don't want to, not all Democrat policies are bad, right? Not all Republican policies are good. There's all kinds of problems. What I want to do is approach things from more of a common sense, grounded point of view, and say, here are some things we can do better in journalism. Let's keep going. On this, Easterling says he supports public. Yeah, we read that. I always remind them, I'm your servant. Okay, we did that. A church fix, good. I can honestly say the reason why I do this is for the love of the people. And if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't be doing this today, Zuiderveld said. This is a very short article. I expected there to be more. I expected there to be more questions. I expected there to be more of a little bit more journalism going on here, a little bit harder questions about, hey, the Democrat Party says this. Can you respond to that? And at least three good, solid lines of questioning would have been great. I didn't see that here, and so it really feels like Lorian Nettleton. Nothing against Lorian Nettleton, uh, personally, because I don't know him, and he might have some really good stuff. I don't know the brief. I don't know what his editor told him. I don't know what he was asked to do. Whether he was just asked to put together a really simple, um, you know, but it wasn't interesting to me. It wasn't that interesting to me. I think that we took some interesting questions out of it, right? But it wasn't that interesting to me, and I think they could do a better job, frankly. But I also appreciate that this is not behind a paywall like the other news, and I think I'm going to go back to Idaho News 6 a little more and look at some more stuff. Guys, I hope this has been helpful. This is the first shot. This is the first little reaction video I wanted to make. I hope it, my goal is to be a part of uh, a little bit of a renaissance with media and news in Twin Falls, because I care about my community and I live here and I don't want to leave. I don't want to be forced out because my local community thinks that the federal election is the only thing that matters, or or state level politics are all that matters. We have a lot of control here in our local community. We have the sheriff, we have all these people, and if we can ask them how we can help them, and we can ask them questions, we can get intel from them. We can ask them, hey, what are the problems locally? What are the crime problems? Where do they stem from? How do we help? We can take control of our community, and where they're not doing their job, we can say, or they're underfunded or whatever, we can say, okay, that's fair. You're underfunded. How do we help? And then we can come up with solutions of our own, because this is our county and we take care of it. And it's not somebody else's county, and it doesn't belong to the state. It belongs to the people who live here. And no matter what they say about national politics or all these things that worry you from the national level, yeah, there's a lot of leverage at the national level, who's president and all that. But possession is 9/10 of the law, and we're here, we're on the ground. And so let's ask better questions, and we'll see where we get. Thanks for watching, guys.